We begin with a woman named Tess Marshall arriving in front of a house she reserved through a website. It is currently pouring rain, and when she reaches the door, she discovers that the keys to the house are not in the mailbox as instructed by the booking agent. Tess tries to contact the person who made the reservation, but can only leave a voicemail asking for a callback. To add to her confusion, when she returns to her car, she notices that the lights inside the house are on. She rings the doorbell and is surprised to see a man inside. The man, named Keith, explains that he is also renting the same house, indicating that the booking agent accidentally made a double booking. Since they cannot contact the booking agents and it is raining heavily outside, Keith feels sorry for Tess and lets her in. He shows her his booking confirmation on the app to prove he is not lying. Still feeling uncomfortable about being in the same house with a stranger, Tess starts looking for the nearest hotel but finds it fully booked for the night. Keith, who overheard her call, informs her that there is a major medical convention in town, making it impossible to find an available hotel room. He then suggests that she stay in the house for the night and lets her have the bedroom. After carrying her suitcase inside, Tess moves into the room where she finds his wallet and decides to take a picture of his ID as a safety measure. She returns the wallet to Keith and then goes to take a shower. When Tess returns to the hallway, she finds Keith waiting for her with a still-sealed bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Still cautious, she politely declines to drink but agrees to sit with him, and they start chatting casually. After revealing that she is in town for a job interview with a filmmaker named Catherine James, Keith mentions that he has seen Catherine's latest film. Not only that, but Catherine's next film will be about a musical collective in Detroit, and Keith mentions being one of the founders. Sharing a common interest, Tess feels more at ease, and the two engage in an animated conversation, with Keith even humorously demonstrating how to flip a set of new sheets, making Tess laugh. Together, they put the new sheets on the bed for her to sleep in, and as they say goodnight, it becomes clear that Keith is starting to like her. At night, however, Tess wakes up to the creaking sound of the door and finds it open. What makes it even more unsettling is that Keith can be heard moaning in his sleep, asking for someone's help. This prompts her to approach him, and unbeknownst to her, the basement door slowly closes in the background. She wakes Keith up, scaring him. Tess explains that she heard the door open and asks if it was him, which he denies in confusion. After apologizing, she makes sure to lock the door before going back to sleep. In the morning, she doesn't see Keith but finds a note from him saying he went out and that he enjoyed spending the night with her. When she finally leaves the house for her job interview, she realizes for the first time that all the houses in the neighborhood are completely abandoned and in ruins, except for the house she and Keith are staying in. However, since she is late, she ignores the glaring red flag and heads to the interview. After the interview, Catherine James asks which part of Detroit Tess is staying in, to which she replies Brightmoor. Just hearing the name worries Catherine, who warns her not to stay in the area as it is not a safe neighborhood, but Tess convinces her that everything is fine. When Tess returns to the house, a homeless man can be seen running in the background. He starts yelling for her to get out of the house. Frightened, Tess runs to get the house keys and locks herself inside before the man can reach her. She tries calling emergency services while watching the man, but unfortunately, they cannot send any units to help her at the moment. Therefore, she packs her bags and tries to settle inside the house for now. Later, she discovers that the toilet paper upstairs has run out, so she goes down to the basement to get more. But when she returns, the door slowly closes by itself, locking her inside. She then realizes she left her phone in the bedroom. To make matters worse, the house key is in her pocket, making it impossible for Keith to get in. Seeing that there is a window, she tries to find something that can help her break it. Instead, she discovers a rope coming out of the wall and decides to pull it. It reveals a sinister door in the basement, and she can see how dark it is inside. She then sits in the basement until she gets bored and tries to use a mirror to reflect some light into the dark room, which turns out to be a straight hallway. Without anything else to do, she finally decides to explore and, once inside the corridor, discovers another door. When she opens it, she finds a small room with dried blood on the bed, a bucket, and a very old camera. The sight horrifies her beyond measure, and she runs back to the basement. Fortunately, Keith finally arrives, and she calls to him through the small window, handing him the key to come and save her. After he rescues her, she begins to panic and grabs her bag to leave, talking about finding a creepy room with a bed, camera, and bucket. Keith, however, doesn't find it strange to find these things in the basement and decides to check for himself. He asks her to wait upstairs in case the basement door closes by itself. It doesn't take long for her to get impatient. She tries to check on him, but at the same time, the door starts to slowly close, and this time, she makes sure to hold it open with a chair before going down. She calls for him again, but he doesn't respond. Tess then goes down the dark corridor until she reaches the room. Strangely, she doesn't find him there. Upon returning to the dark corridor, she discovers another door leading to a set of stairs going even further down. She calls his name again, and this time he starts screaming for help, leaving her no choice but to descend. Tess uses her cell phone light to illuminate the dark corridors, following the sound of Keith's screams. Ahead, she discovers several rusty cages with bowls for feeding dogs. As she ventures deeper, she finally finds a terrified Keith, who claims someone bit him. Keith senses danger around every corner, and they argue about which way is out. But before they can run, they are interrupted by a horrifying, naked humanoid creature that smashes Keith's head against the wall until he dies. The creature then screams at Tess, and what happens next is unknown. The next scene shows AJ Gilbride, a successful Hollywood actor, suddenly receiving a phone call from his colleagues. They say he has been fired from his latest show due to alleged sexual misconduct against an actress. With his career threatened, he flies to Detroit to liquidate one of his properties so he can pay a lawyer for his ongoing case. AJ travels to a rental property he owns in Detroit, which happens to be the same house in Brightmoor. Upon arrival, he sees that Tess's car is still in front of the house, and her and Keith's belongings are scattered around the house. This enrages AJ, who immediately thinks someone is squatting on his property. He tries calling his property manager, but she says there have been no new bookings on the site for the past 2 weeks. Ignoring this for now, he goes out to meet a friend in the city, where we learn that AJ did indeed harass his co-star but refuses to admit it was abuse. The next morning, he starts rummaging through Keith and Tess's things, curious about their identities. He then finds Tess's laptop and sees her username, and later finds her car keys on the small dining table. This leaves one last place to search for the intruders, the basement. He gears up and arms himself with a small knife and flashlight. When he enters the basement, he suddenly hears a loud noise from one side of the wall. He also discovers the rope coming out of the wall and opens the hidden door. However, AJ is not very bright, and upon seeing the bed and camera in the room, he doesn't find it alarming. Instead, he sees it as an opportunity to increase his property's value because more space means more money. He grabs a tape measure and starts measuring the size of the dark corridor and the suspicious room. He gets even more excited when he discovers another hidden door leading further underground and starts measuring as he descends. AJ isn't scared by the sight of the cages. Instead, he continues until he finds a light shining further down the tunnel. Approaching it, he discovers a room with a horrible smell and a small TV playing an old tutorial on how to breastfeed a baby. Suddenly, he feels a tug on the tape measure and decides to let it go. Hearing a creepy noise, he runs deeper into the tunnel in fear. It's at this point that the creature appears in front of him. Terrified, AJ keeps running until he falls into a pit, where he finds Tess there with him. The next scene takes us to sometime in the 80s when the original owner of the house, Frank, is leaving his home. As he gets into the car, we can see that the street is still full of residents. He goes to the grocery store and tells the clerk he's looking for baby items because he's expecting a newborn. But when he returns to the car, we realize there is something wrong with Frank as he starts following a woman's car and watches her when she arrives home. Then, he disguises himself as a city electrician to check for possible power outages. But when he enters her house, he unlocks the bathroom window before returning home. His neighbor approaches him when he arrives, announcing that many people are selling their properties because the city expects an economic crisis, but Frank confidently says he isn't moving. When he returns home and opens the basement door, the agonizing scream of a woman can be heard. Back in the present, Tess advises AJ to stay calm and not anger the creature. As if on cue, the creature appears and extends its hand through the grate, offering them a baby bottle. Tess obeys and drinks the horrible milk, telling AJ to do the same because the creature just wants them to be its babies, but he refuses. Sensing something is wrong, the creature enters the hole with them and lovingly caresses Tess. The creature approaches AJ and begins to speak to him like a baby, in a terrifying voice. It then pulls AJ by the legs and takes him away, leaving Tess alone in the pit. The mother takes AJ to the TV room and starts forcing him to breastfeed. Meanwhile, Tess uses this opportunity to climb out of the pit and escape. Unfortunately, she makes noise stepping on the tape measure, causing the creature to chase her. Worse still, the basement door is locked, forcing her to escape through the small basement window. Luckily, she is helped by the homeless man who had chased her before, narrowly escaping the creature. It turns out that the neighborhood homeless already knew about the creature in the house, and he was the man from the earlier scene. According to him, the creature will come out at night to look for Tess, so she must flee now. Moreover, the creature is not alone in that basement. Meanwhile, AJ is exploring the tunnels when he discovers a bell and a power line, deciding to follow them. Upon reaching the door, he looks back and sees the creature has stopped following him, showing fear of what lies behind the door. When he enters the room, he discovers a very old man lying there, none other than the cruel Frank. On the surface, Tess arrives at a nearby gas station and uses the shopkeeper's phone to call for help. But when the police arrive, they dismiss her and think she is a drug addict, so she convinces them to go to the house to save AJ. However, upon arrival, the officers are skeptical of Tess's claims and think she is just another delusional homeless person, so they leave. Meanwhile, Frank gestures for AJ to get his bedside drawer, and AJ complies. Then, AJ discovers a series of tape recordings with the names of various women and decides to play one. It turns out the recording contains the sound of a woman being raped. Enraged, AJ starts yelling at Frank, until Frank grabs a gun from the drawer and suddenly kills himself. Meanwhile, upstairs, Tess breaks the house window and enters to get the car keys. But when she gets into the car and starts the engine, the mother appears, causing her to drive into the creature, pinning it against the wall until it seemingly passes out. Tess then goes down to rescue AJ, while at the same time, the young man grabs Frank's gun to arm himself and begins to make his way back through the tunnels. Unfortunately, AJ accidentally shoots Tess in the waist. He then helps her up, and they frantically leave the house. But to their surprise, the creature is no longer pinned to the car. With Tess's car wrecked and AJ's car keys somewhere in the tunnels, Tess leads them to where the homeless man lives to seek refuge. There, the man explains to them that the original owner of the house, Frank, was a serial rapist who kept women captive and raped them until they had babies. After generations of inbreeding, the freakish mother is the final product, who has been in the house for over 40 years. The man also assures them they are safe since the creature never ventures far from the house. Unfortunately, the man spoke without knowing, and soon the mother suddenly appears and rips off the man's limbs, then beats him with the severed part. This frightens AJ and Tess, who run to a nearby water tower, but of course, Tess struggles because she is injured. Only when they reach the top does AJ remember he has a gun, but he clumsily drops it from his hands. With nowhere to go, he reveals how much of an idiot he is by throwing Tess off the tower, knowing the creature would try to save its baby. And as expected, she does. Thinking the mother is dead, AJ descends to check on Tess. We see that the mother protected her from the fall, and Tess survived. He then claims he doesn't know what happened and all he remembers is Tess starting to slip. To AJ's surprise, the creature gets up and grabs him by the neck. She gouges out AJ's eyes with her thumbs before tearing his head in half. The mother then approaches Tess and tries to lift her tenderly, but Tess is in a lot of pain. The creature tries to speak to Tess to take her back to the tunnels. Meanwhile, the young woman grabs AJ's gun. She then points it at the mother, and with a look of remorse on her face, pulls the trigger. Tess then gets up and leaves the area, happy to have escaped the terror alive.